The plant took 20 years to build. Sarah and Ethan took it apart in 20 minutes with a few forged signatures and a smile. They left me the keys to the subsidiary, thinking it was a funeral. They forgot I designed the layout of every main line in this county. The evening was supposed to be a victory lap. The air in the ballroom of the Scottsdale Hilton was thick with the smell of expensive catering and the artificial freshness of the filtration system I had spent 3 years perfecting. I was standing near the buffet when I noticed my wife, Sarah, leaning a little too close to Ethan. He was my partner, the face of the company, a man who couldn't tell a pressure valve from a garden hose. "You're doing it again, Marcus," Sarah whispered, stepping toward me. She didn't look at me with pride. She looked at me with disgust. "You're standing there like a statue, and you smell like chlorine. It's embarrassing." "I was at the plant until 4 a.m., making sure the final stage didn't blow a seal, Sarah," I said. "This gala is celebrating that work." Ethan joined us, flashing a smile that was as fake as his tan. He didn't offer a drink. Instead, he handed me a thick manila envelope. "We need to talk, Marcus, in the hallway. Now." We moved to a quiet alcove near the service entrance. Ethan didn't waste time. "The board has reached a decision. We're moving in a different direction. You're being bought out for a nominal fee." I looked at the documents. The numbers were insulting. "A nominal fee? I founded this firm. I hold the patents." "Not anymore," Ethan sneered. "You signed the transfer papers last month during the audit. You're just a man with a wrench, Marcus. You're a liability to our brand. We're courting international investors, and frankly, you look and smell like a janitor. You're out." I turned to Sarah, expecting a spark of loyalty. She just crossed her arms. "He's right. I'm tired of the late nights and the grease under your fingernails. I've already filed for divorce. Ethan and we've been planning this for a while." I didn't say a word. I just watched them walk away. The calculations were clean, I'll give them that. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "We're keeping the main contracts. You can have Vance Hydro, that little subsidiary in the industrial district. It's just a pile of rusted trucks and debt. It's all you're worth. You're making a mistake," I said, my voice flat. "The only mistake was keeping you this long," Ethan laughed, turning his back on me. "Leave your badge on the table. Don't make us call security." I stood there alone as they walked back into the light of the ballroom. I didn't scream. I didn't bang. I walked out into the dry Arizona night, the envelope gripped in my hand. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They thought Vance Hydro was a graveyard. But in my world, you don't need a suit to win. You just need to know how to control the flow. And I was about to turn the valves until they both drowned. 48 hours ago, I was the king of water filtration in the Southwest. Now the only thing I control is the speed of a rusted ceiling fan in a garage that feels like a preheated oven. They say you don't know who your friends are until you're down. But I found out much faster. My wife and my partner didn't just take my company. They took my dignity and handed me a pile of debt called Vance Hydro as a parting gift. They think I'm rotting here, waiting for the heat to finally break me. What they don't realize is that while they're celebrating their victory, I'm learning exactly how to dismantle their world from the shadows. The thermometer on the cinder block wall reads 112 degrees. Sweat tracks through the dust on my skin, leaving pale streaks. I sat on a milk crate. My thumb hovered over the screen of my phone. I opened her profile. There was Sarah, posing in a white bikini by the infinity pool I paid for. Behind her, Ethan was holding a bottle of vintage Cristal. his arm draped over her shoulders like he owned the place. The caption read, "New beginnings. Out with the old, in with the gold." I put the phone face down on the bench. The silence was broken by my phone buzzing. It was Miller, the lead counsel for the firm. This was the third time he'd called today. I let it vibrate against the wood until it stopped. A moment later, a text popped up. "Marcus, Ethan is prepared to offer you another $50,000 if you sign over the remaining maintenance easements for the city district. Don't be stubborn. You need the cash for the divorce lawyers." I didn't reply. They wanted those easements because without them, they couldn't legally bypass the quarterly environmental inspections. They were sloppy, and they were in a hurry to look profitable for the international investors. Instead of calling back, I pulled a stack of municipal code books and Arizona environmental standards toward me. The pages were yellowed and smelled of damp basement. For 18 hours a day, I mapped out the intersection of state law and their new expansion plans. I looked for the one thing Ethan always ignored: the fine print on toxic runoff and pressure thresholds. Every time my stomach growled or the heat made my head swim, I looked back at that photo of them by the pool. They were spending the company's operational reserves on a lifestyle they hadn't earned. They thought I was a man with a wrench who had lost his spark. They were wrong. I was a man with a wrench who knew exactly which bolt held their entire lie together. I just had to wait for the pressure to build. The procurement logs showed exactly what I expected: Mexican sulfur and industrial-grade polymers. While Ethan was busy popping champagne corks, I was digging through the procurement manifests he'd been hiding in the obsolete digital folder of the Vance Hydro server. He'd forgotten that I built the back-end encryption. His new passwords were as transparent as glass to me. He had authorized a massive shipment of industrial-grade coagulants from a cut-rate supplier in Mexico. It was a classic bean counter move. Save 30% on chemicals to pad the quarterly earnings report for the investors. The math didn't lie. These reagents were unstable. They worked on paper, but in the high-heat environment of the Arizona summer, they would begin to break down, causing the pH levels in the Scottsdale district to spike toward the legal limit. It wouldn't kill anyone, but it would turn every high-end faucet in the hills into a fountain of murky, metallic-tasting sludge. The garage was still pushing 100 degrees. I could have called the EPA right then. I could have ended it with one anonymous tip. But that would be too quick. Ethan would find a scapegoat, pay a fine, and move on. I wanted him to sign his own warrant. I spent the next 6 hours drafting a standard operational maintenance notice. To a layman like Ethan, it looked like a mountain of dry bureaucratic jargon. I buried the critical warning on page 14, right between the clauses for pipe insulation and gasket replacement. It explicitly stated that the current chemical balance was volatile and required an immediate system flush to avoid a breach of state health codes. I sent the document to his personal email at 3 in the morning. I knew his patterns. He'd wake up hungover, see a notification from Vance Hydro, and want it off his plate before his morning meeting with the venture capitalists. My phone chimed 2 hours later. An electronic signature had been applied to the document. He hadn't even opened the attachment. He just scrolled to the bottom and clicked Accept. 10 minutes later, Ethan called. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Marcus," he snapped, his voice thick with morning congestion. "I saw your little paperwork dump. If this is about the buyout, Marcus, the answer is still no. I'm busy. I signed it. Now stay out of my way." "I just need the record to be clear, Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "The system needs attention. You've acknowledged the risks now." "The only risk here is you wasting my time," he sneered. "The water is fine. The investors are happy. Don't call me again. The line went dead. I looked at the confirmation receipt on my screen. By ignoring the warning and signing that paper, Ethan had legally assumed personal liability for the upcoming disaster. He thought he was dismissing a nuisance. He had signed off on the liability. The pressure in the lines was rising, and for the first time in weeks, I slept like a baby. It was 115 degrees, but inside the gated community of Silverleaf, the elite didn't feel the sun. They had climate control, misting systems, and infinity pools kept at a crisp 75 degrees. They had my water. And today, during the most important charity gala of the year, they were about to realize that I was the one holding the leash on every drop. I sat in my rusted truck at the edge of the district, my eyes fixed on the digital sensor readings. The Mexican coagulants Ethan had bought to save a few pennies were failing exactly as I'd predicted. The pH levels were spiking, the sulfur content was climbing, and the filtration membranes were choking on the sludge. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't warn Sarah. Instead, I opened the official state portal and logged the breach. Under the Arizona Water Security Act, a deviation this high required an immediate emergency shutdown to prevent permanent damage to the municipal infrastructure. As the owner of the maintenance easements, the law didn't just allow me to cut the flow. It demanded it. I turned the digital key on my laptop. Far beneath the manicured lawns and marble floors of the valley, the heavy steel valves groaned shut. Within minutes, the pressure dropped to zero. I drove toward the heart of the district. I wanted to see the exact moment the illusion shattered. As I pulled up near the gates of Ethan's estate, the silence was eerie. The massive misting towers that cooled the outdoor patio had stopped. The fountains in the driveway sputtered and died, leaving only a pathetic trickle over the stone. Guests in $5,000 suits began to emerge from the house, wiping sweat from their foreheads. The air conditioning units, deprived of their water-cooled condensers, began to hum with a high-pitched metallic whine before seizing up entirely. Ethan burst through the front doors, his face a shade of purple that matched his silk tie. He saw my truck and charged toward me, nearly tripping over a withered rose bush. "Vance, what the hell are you doing?" he screamed, his voice cracking in the dry air. "Turn it back on, now! I have the CEO of Global Infotech in there. We're in the middle of a signing." I leaned against the door of my truck. "I can't do that, Ethan. The chemical levels in your last shipment triggered a level 4 environmental breach. If I open those valves, I'm looking at a felony. And since you signed the liability waiver this morning, so are you." "I don't care about the levels. Fix it." He reached for the manual override box on the exterior wall, his hands shaking. "I wouldn't do that," I said quietly. A black and white SUV from the Water Resources Board pulled up behind me, followed by a local police cruiser. They weren't there for me. They were there to ensure the quarantine of the contaminated sector. "Mr. Vance is correct," the officer said, stepping out and placing a hand on his belt. "Tampering with a lockdown utility during a health alert is a federal offense. Step away from the box, sir." Ethan froze. He looked back at his house, where Sarah stood in the doorway, her makeup beginning to run in the brutal heat. Behind her, the investors were already heading for their cars, their faces masks of irritation and disgust. The deal of a lifetime was evaporating in the Arizona sun. "You're ruining me," Ethan hissed, his eyes wild. "No," I replied, checking my watch. "I'm just following the protocol you approved. It's going to be a very long, very thirsty weekend, Ethan. I suggest you start buying bottled water. I hear the prices go up when it's this hot." I put the truck in gear and drove away. leaving them to sweat in the ruins of a kingdom built on nothing but stolen water and lies. The drought had finally arrived, and I was the only one with the rain. The sound of a luxury car's engine dying in the garage outside my garage was the most honest thing I'd heard in weeks. I didn't look up from my screen. I was busy finalizing the digital certificates for a new contract with the State Department of Water Resources. They needed an auditor who couldn't be bought. And after the Scottsdale disaster, my name was the only one on their list. The door creaked open. The heat followed her in, but it was the smell that hit me first. Not the expensive perfume she used to wear, but the sharp, sour scent of sweat and desperation. Sarah looked like a ghost of the woman who had stood on that Hilton ballroom floor. Her hair was matted, her skin was flushed a dangerous red, and her eyes were swollen. "Marcus," she cracked, her voice like sandpaper. "Please. It's been 3 days. The house is a furnace. We can't even flush the toilets. Ethan he's losing his mind." I continued typing. The cursor blinked steadily, a rhythmic heartbeat of cold logic. "The sector is under a mandatory health quarantine, Sarah. You saw the officers. I'm just a contractor following the state's emergency protocols." She stepped closer, reaching out a hand toward my shoulder, trying to find that old spark of influence she used to hold over me. "Marcus, look at me. Remember that summer in Sedona? Just us and the creek? You told me you'd always protect me. We were a team." "I made a mistake, Marcus. Ethan isn't you. He doesn't care about anything but the image. Please, for the sake of what we had, just turn the valve. Just a little. No one has to know." I paused, my finger hovering over the submit button. I finally turned my head to look at her. There was no anger in my chest, only a profound sense of clarity. "You told me I was boring, Sarah. You said I was just a man with a wrench who smelled like chlorine. You were right. I am a man of systems and standards. And right now, the standard says your husband's negligence has rendered your property a biohazard." "He's not my husband!" she screamed, her composure finally shattering. "The investors are suing him for every dime. The neighbors are filing a class action for the damage to their cooling systems. We're losing everything, Marcus." "You made your choice, Sarah. Now you have to live with it." I turned back to my monitor and clicked the final button. The contract was sealed. The state contract was official. "I have a meeting with the governor's board in an hour," I said, my voice level and icy. "I'd ask you to wash up before you leave, but we both know that's not an option. Close the door on your way out. The dust interferes with the servers." She stood there for a moment, trembling in the brutal Arizona heat, waiting for a mercy that was never coming. When she finally walked out, I didn't watch her go. I just adjusted the cooling fan on my desk and started on the next report. I opened the next file and started to work.